Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right. Hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader, and joining me, as he always does, is my co-host, my partner in crime, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on? How you doing?
Great. How you doing, buddy?
We're doing pretty good. Can't complain. Got a beautiful day outside. Memorial Day weekend. We're doing pretty good.
We got two great guests today, Billy. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So we have joining us for the first time is the last remaining author that we have yet to have on the program from the book Chokeholds, and that is Mark Adamczyk. Mark, welcome.
Hey, Bill. Thanks, Sean. Thank you. Great to be here with Jim, and we'll probably get into some things today that maybe haven't been explored as in much detail in prior shows. Although the prior shows from our other authors have been awesome. So thanks. Look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And then, of course, coming back, returning champion, Jim DiEugenio. Jim's been on with us.
Like a regular now on our show.
Exactly. So, Jim, thank you for coming back on with us.
Returning champion? Does that mean I've made more appearances than anybody else on your show?
You're up there. You're up there.
You and Lisa. I'm not sure.
Lisa Pease and Don McGovern, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rick Otto's been on a number of times as well. So. All
right. Well, so maybe I'm a runner-up. Okay.
Maybe. For the purposes of this show, you're the returning champion. All right, Sean, I know we got a lot to get to, so let's dive right in.
Well, since Mark, this is your first time being on with us, you want to just give a little bio and how you got into this project here at Chokeholds?
Yeah, sure. I'm an attorney, one of three attorneys in the group. I practice in Florida, real estate, corporate type practice, but I've always had a significant interest in the JFK case and in other, modern American history. I'm from Massachusetts originally, and my dad grew up Catholic, and so we talked a lot about the Kennedys, at home growing up before I moved to Florida, like when I was 12. And so I'd get a book or two and a birthday or Christmas and read. And I've read, all different views of the case from, well, you name it. I just wanted to kind of really educate myself. And then I ended up going to college in New Orleans at Tulane. And when I was probably supposed to be studying for my exams in the business school, I would kind of wander on over to the library there. And I was able to find really cool stuff there, like original newspapers, like full newspapers from the Times-Picayune covering the Garrison case. And that was fascinating. And then, of course, I watched the Oliver Stone's film JFK with my dad, and I was like, okay, I'm going to keep reading and figuring out, and I've always been kind of like, really like fact driven, what's really record, there's so many theories, this, that, and the other, but if you can put together, like we've done in Chokeholds, a very solid record, you can kind of come to a very educated position at this time on the case. And, that's really, I've written several articles on Kennedy's and King. Those were driven largely on the JFK records case. So in 2017, 2018, we started seeing problems with the release of records. I started connecting with Jim, writing some columns and articles, and followed what Trump did and what Biden did. And so that's another big project I was involved in.
Well, see, I remember meeting Mark online, okay, and he emailed me and said, you know, I'm an attorney and I've got this interest in this JFK Collections Act. Would you mind if I started writing some articles about the subject, you know, for your website? And I said, no, certainly, go ahead. And to my knowledge, and I think I'm correct about this, you know, Mark wrote the first academic articles that were critical of what Trump and Biden were doing with the act. I don't remember seeing those kinds of legalistic analysis, the kind of that he brought forth. Okay, and I'm pretty sure, and he can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I'm pretty sure it was Mark who uncovered the whole, say, modus operandi that Trump was going to use to dodge the act, which of course he can explain it better than I can. The whole Gannon memo scam, all right, which was made up, it's called that because it was made up by some flunky in the Justice Department in order to avoid see, when they wrote the act, they said everything is out by October of 2017. There was one qualification. If the President of the United States deemed necessary for national security that a document not be released, he could do that, but on the condition that he identified the document and explained the exception. All right. And so Trump's lawyers knew they had to get around that. All right. And so they got this guy, I think his name is Joseph Gannon, in the Department of Justice to put together this transparently phony excuse, okay, why they didn't have to do this. All right. And so this is why, by the way, to this day, and remember, this is now 7 years later, okay, we still don't have an adequate identifying system, you know, for the documents that are still being withheld. And there's about 4,700 of them. Okay. Okay. So why don't you have Mark explain the idea behind the Gannon memo?
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mark.
sure. Yeah, Jim, that sounds right. I don't remember exactly how Andrew Eiler came across the Gannon memo. I think it was when we were working with some other attorneys to figure out what to do about the continued classification of these records and what we felt was a blatant violation of the JFK Records Act. So as Jim said, Trump, you know, within a few days of October 26, 2017, the statutory deadline, was tweeting, you know, I'm excited to release all the records. This will be a great moment. I personally, regardless of your politics, that was one of the reasons I was happy for his election in 2016, because I thought he was going to do something about this. That's pretty much the only thing I thought about. Like, if any president's going to be somewhat independent here and show some fortitude, it would be him. And then now we found out on literally the 11th hour that he got visits from the intelligence agencies. We don't know exactly who or when, but we have a pretty good idea. And he then immediately issued a 6-month blanket delay for all records. No, as Jim said, no identification of a single record or a batch of records in a certain classification that could, you know, maybe be released right away. And it's funny, I was studying and I had access to the database, and I was starting to compare what was, quote, released in 2017 and 2018 and make it look like they were complying with the statute, but I mean, a huge portion of them were just re-released from the same redactions approved by the ARB, 30 years prior.
Right.
So that's so what back to what Jim was saying. Yes, an attorney advising the White House, Curtis Gannon, he has his name on it, but let's just assume it was, quote, researched by a group of lawyers. They came up with plausible grounds for Trump to do what he did. And you know what? Only a few people in the world, Andrew, myself, and maybe a few others, could see what was going on here. They basically stripped the key parts of the JFK Records Act, how it was supposed to work and be implemented by Congress and the ARB, and just completely changed the law effectively and told the president, I guess, that was okay, that this is what you can do under the act. And Andrew and I, after really, I mean, Andrew, he dissected the heck out of that Gannon memo, and we really came to an understanding of what was going on.
See, what they did is, instead of treating and again, Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, all right, what they decided to do was, instead of taking up each individual document, all right, and doing what the law said it did, right, they decided to group them all together, okay, and say that the president has the right to go ahead and retain these documents, simply because he was the president. He didn't have to go ahead, and explain each and every document. Now, one of the reasons they can get away with this, of course, is that there was no ARB. The ARB had been disbanded in 1998. Right. And on top of that, to make everything worse, 4 out of the 5 members were dead. Okay, Thunheim is the only one that's still around. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Yeah. Okay, so therefore, there was no contra chorus to say what you're doing is wrong. Thunheim was the only guy out there saying, look, this is silly. All these documents should be released. All right, and so you would think, this is probably going to sound so naive, it's a little sick, but you would think the media would make something out of this, something intelligent, and something pertinent to what, and by the way, we're talking about Trump. To show that this is a nonpartisan issue, what Biden did is just as bad or worse, than when Trump did. Okay. Right. What Trump did is he devised a legalistic escape hatch. All right. What Biden did was actually set the JFK Act back to the days of the jungle. Because what he did, and again, Mark can probably explain this better than I can, he actually is now going to see what was so great about the ARB is that there was no pleading your case, okay? Because they had the power to declassify the document, all right? And Thunheim told me, when the FBI came in for the first time, they put a document on the screen and they said, we're going to declassify this, all right? Unless you have an absolute lead pipe, excuse that some guy's going to be, murdered in Morocco or something, unless if we do, all right. And so the FBI liaison had come with the FBI lawyer, and the FBI liaison turns to the lawyer, and he says, "Can they really do that?" And the lawyer goes, "Yes, they can." Okay. And so it was really, really a very difficult situation to get out of. Well, see, what Biden has done now, he set up this classification board, okay, in which these guys now come in and are allowed to plead their case. to stop declassification. So in other words, what we're back at now, almost, maybe not completely, but what we're back at now is at the days of the whole FOIA thing. Okay, the Freedom of Information Act, where the defendant gets to plead his case as to why it should not be declassified. See, the whole thing about the ARB is that it was a quantum leap ahead of the Freedom of Information Act. Okay, the burden of proof was on the defendant. Okay, and the ARB wasn't just the plaintiffs; they were the judge, jury, and executioner. All right, and so that's what made it so powerful. That's why we got 2 million documents. And a lot of them were very, very important, although the media manages, not report on them. People like Probe and CTKA and we did. Okay, and that's how it got out there. But what Biden has done, I believe, is just as bad, if not worse, than what Trump did.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Jim. So Trump, after his 6-month extension, kicked it another 3 years down the road. And then Biden, of course, is president. And I think it was the fall of 2021. Biden then kicks it another year down the road, actually more than a year, into December 2022. And that's when he came out with his transparency plans. I think he called it in his executive memorandum, which is not statute. It's not a court decision. It's just Biden issuing an order, right? That, like Jim said, allowed agencies to now feel comfortable when they want to release something, plead their case. And if it's not the right time under grounds of national security or whatever reason, not even close to the standards of the JFK Act and what the ARB would govern. So now, like Jim said, we're in no man's land. It's funny because it's not funny, but the JFK Act in its very first page talks about the importance of prior executive orders of presidents authorizing secrecy and classification on the grounds of national security. And that's all they had to say. That was out the window. Congress said only in the rarest of circumstances should a document be withheld at this point in time. This is 92. Here we are, another 2024, and it's worse.
Right.
So, and of course, the memo we talked about has been operative for each president going forward to not only strip the key parts of the act and what the president's supposed to do, but make it worse by giving them authority they don't have under the act. And the last thing I'll say on this for now, which is really key, is that people don't realize, and we've written about it. I know Andrew's looked at this in great detail. The president does not have jurisdiction over congressional records, non-executive branch records, meaning that by 2017, at the very latest, the HSCA reports, depositions, whatever, and the church committee, things like that, should have been automatically released without presidential discretion. I mean, think about the additional information we'd have by now.
Let me ask you guys this. I think it was Pompeo that ends up taking over a couple intelligence people to see Trump the day before all this. What do you guys think they said to Trump to have him turn around and do what he did?
Jim, maybe we should talk about the Napolitano story here.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something we've been looking at recently, a very, very recent article. So no one knows what was said, if it was Pompeo or his associates, maybe a combination or whatever. Trump apparently had a discussion recently with Judge Andrew Napolitano, who was a judge in New Jersey, and then now I think he's more of a publicist and writer. But apparently they had a pretty close relationship, and spoke about, well, what things. Trump was like, well, how did I do? What things could I have done during my presidency? And Napolitano reminded him about his commitment to release the JFK records. And he said, Judge, someday when there's not a dozen people listening in on this phone call, and he got animated, I'll tell you this. If they had shown you what they shown me, you wouldn't have released the records either. And that's pretty much a direct quote.
That's Enough Out of You is sponsored by Carfecta, Scranton's premier destination for finding the vehicle of your dreams. With a commitment to service, value, and selection, Carfecta is your trusted partner in every step of your auto purchase journey. Our sales staff will work with you to select the perfect vehicle from our diverse inventory. Our friendly office staff will assist you in securing financing and offering warranties. At Carfecta, our dedicated team is here to make your car buying experience seamless and satisfying. Located in Scranton, Pennsylvania at 220 South 7th Avenue, or call us at 272-770-0080 and check us out on Facebook. With years of experience serving the area, our dealership is dedicated to offering high-quality pre-owned vehicles to our customers. From the moment you walk through our door, we're committed to providing you with a great car buying experience. With our skilled sales staff and financing options, we'll help you get the vehicle you want at the great price you deserve. Visit Carfecta today and let us exceed your expectations. Are you thinking about selling your house? Well, Bob Connors, a realtor at Christian Saunders Real Estate, says, I can't sell your house, but I sure as heck can market it and get it from sell to sold. Call Bob today for great marketing and to get a ton of eyeballs on your house. Are you in the market to buy a home? Not sure where to start? If it looks like something you shouldn't buy, Bob's going to tell you that. Think you can't buy a house or have no idea where to start? Been there, done that. Bob will get you going in the right direction. You can reach Bob at 570-614-3624 or 570-335-9000. And you can find Bob on Facebook at Bob Connors-Realtor. Whether you call Bob or not, please remember, stay awesome, all you awesome humans, and be kind to each other. Bob Connors, the realest real estater. And thanks to Bob Connors and Christian Saunders Real Estate for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You.
Oh, go talk about the follow-up. Tucker Carlson.
Oh, Tucker. Oh my gosh. Well, that one, is a little bit. I like the Napolitano story because it comes, directly from a judge, talking about a direct conversation he had with Trump. We know Tucker Carlson a bit earlier went on his nightly news show and with a bombshell. He said we had a source that has direct knowledge of what the CIA records contain and has seen them. And I think the question was asked by Tucker or his team, did the CIA have an involvement in the assassination? And the unequivocal answer was yes. Now, where does that go? There's a lot more sort of hearsay there, but those are very recent stories that, they're going to keep coming out.
Mark, don't forget the best part. The day after Carlson broadcast that show, he got a phone call from Pompeo's lawyer.
Right.
And he threatened him.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so Tucker Carlson said, wait a minute, you're telling me that it's more important to protect your secrecy than to find out who killed Kennedy?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did talk about that phone call from the lawyer, and he felt threatened, and soon thereafter he was relieved of his duties. Right.
Right. That's correct. All right, but we're not supposed to make any association between those two events. All right.
So, guys, what I really wanted to focus on tonight is chapter 2 of the book is Oswald's intelligence connections. Is just tremendous. But before we go on to that, is there anything, Mark or Jim, you guys want to add about the legal framework of the book or anything like that?
I know you had Andrew on, and he did a great job of dissecting the JFK Act. He's just mastered it. And there's a section of the book that's really good about legal standards and burden of proof. So in a nutshell, Andrew explains the different standards of proof that are used in the United States court system, depending on the issue and the allegations and the claims. So the goal of chokeholds was to use something far higher than what we call preponderance of the evidence, which is the civil standard, like in a negligence or a wrongful death trial. While it may be more probable than not that someone was grossly negligent and hurt someone or killed someone, where there's no other more probable explanation than that person could be held liable for money damages, right? A judgment. So we agreed as a group that wasn't nearly good enough. The goal was to go through an agreed number of topics. We have 10 chapters that are what we believe will meet that a much higher standard. So you can go all the way up to beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Which is the criminal standard, which essentially means that a jury has to find by at least 95% or higher of a probability that the defendant committed the crime. The standard is higher because the defendant faces jail time or even worse. So I think what we're asking the readers to do is look at the Oswald situation, and would he have been convicted by that standard of proof? Almost nobody who's actually looked at the facts and looks at the record agrees that he could have been.
Absolutely.
And then we go to, the sort of the other things like the cover up and the obstruction of justice and say, okay, somewhere in between is clear and convincing evidence, which is, still a very high probability, not up to beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, we've laid out in the book those minimum standards where if you take all 10 chapters together, the introduction, the conclusion, you get up, I think, to 100% or 99% conclusion that there was in fact a conspiracy. So that was our thought.
Jim, anything you want to add on that?
Well, what was interesting that Andrew brought up is that the highest standard, that is beyond a reasonable doubt, and it used to be to a moral certainty, he found out that this was added and devised in order not so much to protect the defendant, but to allow the community to feel secure that they had done the right thing. Because this, of course, was the most drastic measures one could take, in a criminal case, either taking away someone's freedom for a very long time or perhaps even executing them. And he found out that it was done not so much for the defendant, but for the members of the citizenry to feel that they had done the right thing, so it would not be on their consciousness or conscience that they had unjustly taken away a man's life. Now, when I read that, I said, could you come up with a better comparison to the JFK case than that one? Because that's exactly what happened here. Okay, except it's not just a community, it's a national problem that we have today, is that the citizenry has lost faith in its government, and it begins back in 1964. And by the way, I'm not talking through my hat on that, because Kevin Phillips, in his book, Arrogant Capital, has a graph in the opening pages of the book, which I think he called a portrait in cynicism, the declining belief in government by the American people. When JFK was inaugurated, it was like at 78%. The first big drop was in 1964, the year the Warren Commission took. Right. Okay, and it's like a toboggan slide down. I think at that time it was down to like 21% or something like that. Right. All right, and so you couldn't get more apropos, to the JFK case than that standard. Okay, here's the book. All right, the JFK Assassination Chokeholds, and the subtitle is that inescapably proved there was a conspiracy. All right, and as Mark was saying, what we tried to do was to show how each one of these chokeholds would be enough to bring up the question of innocence in the Oswald case, but taken together and combined, I think the word is consilience, okay, that they overwhelmingly prove that Oswald could have and should have never been convicted in a court of law.
Right.
Now, the chapter you're talking about on Oswald and the community of intelligence in the United States,
Right.
there's, well, to make the case for this would take probably about an hour or so. But just to go ahead and hit a couple of highlights. Here's a big question. How the heck did Oswald learn Russian?
Yeah.
And by the way, he had a very strong affinity for Russian before he left the United States. There was a woman named Rosalind Quinn, all right, who was learning Russian because she wanted to get a job in the State Department, all right, and she had gone to Berlitz for a year and a half to learn the language. One of Oswald's buddies in the Marine Corps knew, I think it was her cousin or something, and he goes, "Well, we got a guy who speaks Russian here at Santa Ana, all right. Why don't you go out with them and go ahead and exchange your knowledge?" And so they did, and they spoke in Russian. And she said, "That guy speaks better Russian than I do." Okay, and as far as I know, he's never had a tutoring class or anything like that. Now, come on. Russian is one of the most difficult languages there is to speak.
Right.
All right. So then when he goes over to Russia, Ernest Titovets, who's his best friend in Minsk, I met him in person. And he said, Oswald spoke really good Russian when he got here. Okay. So this whole thing about a guy from Texas who showed no strong affinity, for any kind of academic pursuits, suddenly manages to learn one of the most difficult languages there is to learn, and in a matter of months, and we're supposed to believe it's just a coincidence that he gets a hardship discharge a few months before he's supposed to leave the Marine Corps, and he defects to Russia. Now that's supposed to be an accident. Right. We're supposed to believe that was just an accident. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think it was an accident, and that's just one among many. Now, I don't know.
That got Garrison really suspicious. That's one of the things that he was really suspicious about, is Oswald learning Russian.
Right. And by the way, according to Marina, according to George the Morning Show, and I already mentioned Rosalind Quinn, he spoke really, in addition to Titovets, they all said he spoke really good Russian. They didn't have any trouble, understanding him. Okay. So someone, and the Warren Commission is so silly on this, to think that a guy could learn Russian by listening to Russian records, okay, and reading Russian newspapers. I mean, this is one of the silliest things. I mean, in that whole silly, let's quote the late Cyril Wecht on this. They should move those 26 volumes from the nonfiction to the fiction right next to Grimm's fairy tales. Okay, that a guy could learn Russian on his own is just preposterous. Yeah. All right, it just wouldn't happen that way. All right, now another thing, I don't know if I've talked about this on this show. Have I talked about Betsy Wolfe?
No, I wanted to get to that though, about Betsy Wolfe and the Office of Mail Logistics and how Oswald's file got bypassed. Let's go into that.
Betsy Wolfe? Okay, Betsy Wolfe.
Yeah, let's go into Betsy Wolfe.
Okay, who is Betsy Wolfe? Betsy Wolfe is one of these people who hardly anybody knew about, because she worked very quietly for the House Select Committee on Assassinations. It wasn't until Malcolm Blunt sent me her papers that were declassified that I even knew who the heck she was or what she was doing. Betsy Wolf's job was to analyze the Oswald file. And she first asked the CIA, I need a copy of each charter from each division, all right, in the agency. So they gave her, I think there were 9 divisions at that time. So she got every one of the charters. She read all through them, absorbed them, digested them. Then she mapped out a kind of graph. All right, well, then this is what the Oswald file should do. So then when she was ready, she said, okay, give me the Oswald file. All right. So the CIA gave her the Oswald file. And guess what? It didn't do what she thought it was going to do.
Right.
All right. First of all, there was no 201 file open for 13 months. All right. The 201 file is the most common file that there is in the CIA.
Right.
And anytime somebody does something of interest, okay, there's a 201 file open. Now, if you have a Marine defector going over to Moscow and threatening to turn over radar secrets,
Pretty
okay,
important.
I think that makes him a person of interest. All right. But there was no 201 file open for 13 months. That's the first thing that puzzled her. And then she noticed that, well, why didn't it go to the SR division, the Soviet Russia division? It didn't go there. It went to a place called OS, which is the Office of Security. All right.
This is the last place it should have went to.
And here's the catch. OS does not set up 201 files. All right. So this very much interested her. And she started calling in people who either worked in the CIA or had worked in the CIA. And they all agreed with her. They said, right, there should have been a 201 file open. The minute the CIA found out that he was threatening to give away secrets, it was just a few days after he defected, yeah, there should have been a 201 file open. All right. And then, no, you're right. It should not have gone to OS. It should have gone to the SR division.
Right.
All right. So this puzzles her. And she keeps on doing these interviews. And then in the fall of 1978, just a couple of months before the House Select Committee terminated, she got an interview with a guy named Bob Gambino.
Right.
Bob Gambino was, at that time, the chief of the Office of Security. And so she posed this problem to him. Okay. Why did it go to your department and not the SR division? Everybody's telling me that's where it should have gone. And from my reading, that's where it should have gone. And Gambino gave her a eureka moment. He said, look, it doesn't matter how many documents come in, and it doesn't matter if they're pre-stamped. All right. If the client goes to the first gate is the Office of Mail Logistics.
Right.
And he makes a request to them, that is where the documents will go to.
Right.
In other words, and really understand this, somebody had rigged Oswald's file at the time he was going to the Soviet Union.
Right.
My God, are you serious? This little hick from Texas, okay? And the CIA is rigging his file as he's going to
Right.
Russia? Okay, why? What for? What possibly could be the purpose of this?
Right.
All right? Obviously somebody was interested in Oswald from the very, very beginning. Okay? So when this, here's the capper. Now listen to what I'm going to say very carefully. When Malcolm Blunt sent me the file, he wrote a little introductory note, okay, saying words to the effect, as you'll see, Jim, Betsy Wolfe was on to the riddle of Oswald during the House Select Committee on Assassinations. But this is all I've been able to find out. And he sent me the papers. As you'll notice, they're handwritten in pen. And he was right. I couldn't believe it. They were never even typed in the memorandum form. It was her handwritten notes on all the interviews that she gave. Okay? And they're, of course, because they're in handwritten form, they never made it into the volumes. This is, now, if you need anything more to shock you, okay, I think this is it. That her incredible discoveries were not even typed, and they were not in the final report. At least I've never been able to find them in the final report. Okay? Which I think is just ridiculous. All right. I mean, this should have been, at the very least, it should have been in the volumes. I believe it should have been in the final report. Okay. So, this is another thing that we have in the book. All right. And I think that is really, really important. Now, of course, there's something that's always been of interest is the activities of Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans in the summer of 1963.
But Jim, before we get to that, could you, and by the way, I want to tell our listeners that the Chokeholds book is up on our bookshop. You could get it there. I have the book. It's tremendous. But before we get into that, could you talk about two people, Pete Bagley and Jane Roman, and what they said about Oswald?
Say those two names again.
Bagley.
Tenant Bagley.
Tenant Bagley.
Okay. Tenant Bagley was a counterintelligence guy for the CIA. He had retired, okay, after something like 23 or 24 years. And he was living in Brussels. Malcolm Blunt struck up a relationship with him. All right. And Malcolm met him first in the United States when Bagley came back for an intelligence conference. All right. And they got acquainted, and Malcolm went over to, because Malcolm lives in England, he went over to Brussels to meet Pete in person. His nickname is Pete.
Right.
His formal name is Tenant Bagley. All right. And Malcolm, because Malcolm was onto this before I was onto it. He's the guy who sent it to me. All right. And he's sitting there having coffee with Bagley. Okay. And he knows that Bagley worked counterintelligence. So he diagrams this routing thing, this routing system, on a piece of paper, and he shows it to Bagley. Okay. And he says, this was the routing system of Oswald's files when they came into the CIA. What do you think? Is he a witting defector, or is he an unwitting defector? And so Bagley looks at it for a few seconds, turns around to question on Malcolm, and says, well, what do you think? And Malcolm says, I don't know. Okay. And he says, come on, you got to have an idea. All right. And Malcolm blurts out, unwitting. And Bagley goes, you're wrong. He had to be a witting defector with that kind of a routing system. All right. Okay. So here you had a high-ranking CIA counterintelligence official saying for the first time that Oswald was a witting defector. Okay. Now, the other person that you're bringing up is Jane Roman. All right. And Jane Roman was also in the CIA, except she wasn't in the field. She worked in the, at Langley. Okay.
Right.
Years later, after she had retired, Jeff Morley and John Newman visited her. Okay. because they had a problem with a document that she signed off on. Okay. And this is the famous document that went out, I believe, in September or October of 1963, saying that this is all the information we have on Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, what's important about this is around the time Oswald goes to Mexico City.
Right.
All right. Well, John and Jeff found out that, guess what? This was not all the information that the CIA had on Oswald. That someone in the CIA, they think it was James Angleton, had split Oswald's file in two. All right. So that nobody would have all the information they had on Oswald.
Right.
But Roman had signed off on this. All right. So John and Jeff go to see her, and they confront her with this paradox. Okay. And they show her, A, what she had signed off on, and B, what the truth really was. And she's sitting there puzzled, and she goes, "You're right. That's not true." And so they ask her to explain it, and she says, "The only thing I can think of is this was a really hot file, okay, known only to people in the clandestine services about it."
Wow.
All right, okay, and it denotes, some kind of operation.
Right.
All right, okay, and that, you've combined that with Tenant Bagley, and if you combine that with Betsy Wolfe, all right, it's a very, very incriminating case. And we haven't even gotten to what Oswald was doing in New Orleans.
Oh.
Okay, what we're talking about here is the stuff that they knew about at Langley, at CIA headquarters. All right. So the mystery about Oswald today, due to the assassinations record, and let me make this as blunt and as clear as I can. We would have never known any of this stuff unless it was for the ARB.
Right.
Okay. We wouldn't have known this stuff until 2029. Okay. 5 years from now. And it would not have been circulated like it is now, for the simple reason that the ARB attracted some attention, especially from people in the JFK community. And they communicated with each other about these discoveries. Because what we're talking about here, and I don't think I'm exaggerating very much at all right, is really a quantum leap ahead in trying to decipher who Oswald really was. Now, you could have made all kinds of guesses back in 67, 68, 69, which a lot of people did, all right? But we now have, this is like evidence, that something is really wrong with our picture of Lee Harvey Oswald. The Warren Commission was completely wrong.
Right.
Hey, Sean, I know that people are really busy these days. I know you're busy. Between work, the podcast, the family, and the band I started, I'm extremely busy. Now, I'm fortunate to work from home, but a lot of people are still in the office or now going back into the office. And we just don't have time to take the dog for a walk. Or if you have multiple dogs or dogs and cats, and there are days you're just working late or going right to dinner right from work, that's where Paulie's Possum Pet Care comes in. Now, Paulie, spelled Pawly', Possum, Pawsome, Pet Care. And he's our newest sponsor.
Yeah, it's great to have him on board, Billy. I mean, it's owned by Paul Ferraro, who's an old college buddy of mine. We went together to school there at Marywood University. Great guy. I can tell you he's a reliable guy, because I know a lot of people, it's tough to trust somebody with your pet, but I can tell you right now, Paulie's a trustworthy guy. And, Bill, it's a thing like, even if you you have to go out and you want a night on the town or something, you want to go out and you need somebody to look after your pet, I mean, it's emergencies come up, whatever. And like you said, just the time right now for people is really tight, and they have somebody to walk their dog, and Polly's a great guy. So, let's go over some of the pricing, Billy, that he has.
Yeah, sure. So dog walking for one dog for half an hour is $25. Two dogs to walk at the same time is $40. A drop-in visit for one pet, dogs or cats, is $25 per visit. Two pets is $40 per visit, and three or more pets is $60 per visit. I got to tell you, that is pretty reasonable. House sitting he'll do on an individual basis. So give Paulie a call, 570-790-1088, or look him up on Facebook. Again, it's Paulie's Possum Pet Care, PAWLY PAWSOME Pet Care. And you can see some of the pictures he has on Facebook of some of the pets that he watches. Really, really great guy with pets, and definitely worth giving him a call. Take a look on Facebook, give him a like on Facebook, and we certainly thank Paulie for sponsoring us here on That's Enough Out of You.
Absolutely, great guy to have on board, and great to have him as one of our sponsors, Billy.
All right, Paulie's Possum Pet Care. Thank you for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. Look Paulie's Possum Pet Care up on Facebook, or give him a call. It's 570-790-1088. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
Mark, is there anything you want to add to that before we go on to New Orleans?
No, that's couldn't say any better. I mean, I was also very taken back about the 201 file not being. I know John Newman talks about this in the movie, Jim, the Destiny Betrayed, and it's really powerful how a 201 file should have been open and it wasn't for more than a year. That really was startling. So no, I mean, I think we've covered the problems with the CIA files, their interests in Oswald. I mean, how in the world could someone with his background go to Russia, have his file, kind of kept on the sidelines in the security office, and then come back to the United States without a glitch whatsoever with a Russian wife and get resettled in Dallas? I mean, it just keeps adding up, all these things.
Sure. And let me ask, let's start off New Orleans with this question, because I know, Mark, you said that you had the opportunity to research this case through New Orleans, going to school in Tulane. But the importance of New Orleans, when Oswald is in New Orleans and he's down there working with the FPCC, do you guys feel that he was at that point he's being set up as a patsy in the Kennedy assassination, or do you feel that his work there is just to infiltrate the FPCC, and then later on the conspirators realized we have a perfect patsy here, and they would use him? Or do you feel this plot to kill Kennedy goes back to New Orleans and Oswald was being set up there?
I mean, I'll tell you what I think. I mean, Jim probably agrees with most, maybe doesn't, but I think initially he went back to New Orleans to get involved on assignment with the spying. He could have been spying on both. He could have been part of an operation to check out the anti-Castro Cuban operations and eventually starting the FPCC one person chapter. So I don't think that there was a firm plot in place yet to go get Kennedy in the fall. But certainly his time there, especially when he became a lot more public in August through his shenanigans with the FPCC, his public interactions with the anti-Castro DRE group. I think you can logically say at that point that they were looking at him as a very pliable patsy, and then of course goes back to Dallas.
Jim, what do you think?
Well, here's the really interesting part of this, and again, it's something that we didn't know before the ARB. The two guys in on the creation of the anti-Fair Play for Cuba Committee campaign inside the CIA were David Phillips and James McCord.
Right.
Okay. Again, this is something we didn't know.
Right.
All right. Now, I find that to be very, very interesting, okay, for a lot of different reasons, okay, but one of the most important reasons is that, according to his brother, as Phillips was dying, I believe in 1988 or 1989,
right,
his brother asked him, "Were you in Dallas on the day that Kennedy was killed?" And after a pause, he said, "Yes." And he hung up on him. Okay, right. So I think this is and also let's not forget, Phillips had a desk in Mexico City.
Right, right.
All right. Okay. And Oswald was reportedly, allegedly in Mexico City. And, and in fact, we also have information that from Gordon Novell, that a man who named Phillips and who fit his description was in New Orleans in 1961, talking to people in Guy Bannister's office. All right. So I think in anybody's estimation, David Phillips is certainly what they call in the trade a person of interest in the Kennedy assassination. Now, Oswald's activities, as Mark said, they begin to really heat up in the latter part of the summer of 1963. Okay, but he did make that terrible mistake by putting the address of 544 Camp Street, on one of his flyers, right? Which kind of literally led people to the door of Guy Bannister's office. All right. Now, what's so interesting is that here's to put it in a nutshell. Here you have a communist, a guy who had defected to Russia, who speaks very good Russian. He comes back to the United States. Who does he hang out with? Well, in Dallas-Fort Worth, it's the white Russian community.
Right.
The people who want to overthrow the communists in Russia and bring back the Tsar. Okay. And then he goes in New Orleans, and who does he hang out with there? The anti-Castro Cuban exiles who want to overthrow Castro and bring back Batista. Okay. I mean, now really, this is so bizarre, and how the Warren Commission papered this over, is just so crazy, as to be, beyond funny. All right, but they did.
The last city that the FPCC should really be in, I mean, besides Miami, would probably be New Orleans.
Right, and in fact, when Oswald wrote New York City, okay, ordering some of their flyers, they said, no, don't open up a chapter in New Orleans, okay? But he did anyway. And not only did he open up a chapter, but there he is on the main thoroughfares, the main streets, like Canal Street, which is if you've ever been in New Orleans, it's one of the main streets in that city, okay? And here he is, this lonely figure, okay, passing out Fair Play for Cuba Committee flyers, with this very conservative community. You know, why? Why would he do that? And by the way, to give you a little further insight into this, I know a guy named Ray Marcus who used to be a communist back in the 50s. All right. And he told me, Jim, the minute I saw those films of Oswald in New Orleans on the main thoroughfares and streets, I knew something was wrong. And I said, well, how come? He goes, because Jim, when we used to do that kind of stuff, we never did it in public because you didn't want to humiliate somebody, you know, in public by handing him one of those flyers. What we used to do is we used to go at night, and if the door was open, we would leave them on the floor.
Right.
Okay. You know, so somebody could pick them up at will, or if the door was locked, we would slide it under. But we wouldn't confront somebody in broad daylight with a pro-Castro flyer in a place like New Orleans.
Right.
All right. So obviously, Oswald was up to something. That's how I figured this out, you know, from the very beginning. All right. And then, of course, he approaches the DRE, all right, the Directory Studente, you know,
Right.
you know, and their ringleader, Carlos Bringuier. He goes to, I think Kerry Thornley brought him to a meeting behind Bringuier's pawn shop or whatever it was. Okay. And so he meets Bringuier. All right. And he tries to befriend him and give him some advice, you know, because, you know, I used to be in the Marines, etc. And so then a few days later, he's out there in broad daylight, you know, and these other guys say, hey, look, this Oswald guy who was trying to befriend us is campaigning for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. And so Bringuier goes over and they get in this phony fight.
Right.
Okay. All right. And here's the payoff. It was Bringuier who punched Oswald, not the other way around. But Bringuier gets off scot-free, and Oswald goes to jail and has to pay a fine. For what? Receiving a punch? I didn't know there was a law against that. Okay, so what does he do? Now listen to this one. Why on earth would a communist who's in jail about an altercation on a city street, why would he want to talk to the FBI? Okay. But that's what Oswald requested. He requested to talk to the FBI. All right. And then the guy who was working that night said he looked up Oswald's file. All right. And it was locked. But the control agent was Warren DeBreeze,
Right.
who makes perfect sense because he spoke fluent Spanish. He was their guy on the Cuban exile front.
Right.
All right. So they sent Quigley. All right. John Quigley instead. This interview that Quigley did reportedly lasts over an hour. Okay. What on earth could Oswald have to say, you know, in that length of time? Okay. To an FBI agent. All right.
He just shredded notes, right, Quigley?
Yeah, they're very sparse notes. But
Okay.
we do know this. We do know this. In addition to the CIA having an anti-FPCC campaign, so did the FBI. All right. The FBI did. And the guy running it for the FBI was Carter DeLoach, about the number 3 or number 4 guy at FBI headquarters. All right. And so now with Oswald flashed all over the newspapers, he even got on TV. All right. You know, this little nobody, you know, with these, you know, he gets all this publicity. All right. He even goes to the newspapers after and wants to talk to the newspapers afterwards. All right. And so now he gets on the radio with, of all people, Ed Butler and Carlos Bringuier. All right. William Stuckey is the host. Now, Paul Blow discovered something really weird about this that nobody knew before. In 1962, a full year before this, William Stuckey wrote the FBI office in New Orleans and asked them, is there any representative of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans today? Now, if you want to hear something even worse than that, Paul also found out that Oswald had sent away for FPCC literature in late 1962, not 63. That was the first time he did it. So in other words, if you want to use a little bit of dramatic license, you could say that this had been in the making for at least 12 months before. All right. This whole phony, debate between Butler, Stuckey, and Bernier and Oswald, in which, if you recall, Oswald slipped up. They exposed him for being a Russian defector, and he said, "I was under the protection of the state." Oh, wait a minute, no, I was not. I was not under the protection of the State Department while I was in Russia. Okay.
Yep.
So another intelligence connection that's brought up in the book is the phone call that Oswald makes from the jail cell to North Carolina to a guy by the name of John Hurt. You want to go into that, Jim and Mark?
Well,
Mark,
yeah.
you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm going to just say one quick interesting thing about the Newman building, 544 Camp Street. I mean, not only did is it pretty undisputed at this point that Oswald kept an office there, was seen entering the building with Ferry, was probably there maybe in his early assignments to help Bannister and Arcadia Smith with certain assignments that would help their cause. But I was in New Orleans like 2 years ago, and I tried to find it when I was in college, and I couldn't. And I'm like, where's Camp and Lafayette Street? I mean, Jim, you probably know what I'm talking about. And then I went back again just to make sure I wasn't crazy, and the building's not there. It's actually like the Hale Boggs Federal Building now or something. So just a little bit, if you're going there to find it, there is a building a few blocks the other way on Camp Street that looks very similar. I mean, if you look at pictures, like who knows, but that was an interesting thing I saw.
They got rid of the Newman building shortly after.
Yeah.
About 1969, 1970 or something like that, in a very, very weird transaction. Okay. But it seemed to me going through those documents that they just didn't want it there anymore. All right. And I wrote about it in Destiny Betrayed. So go ahead. You want to talk about the Hurt call?
Yeah. So the only known call that Oswald attempted to make while in custody in Dallas the weekend of the assassination, and the call never got through. I think they told him or wrote on some slip that call not connected or something, and I guess one of the dispatchers maybe kept the note. I think the story is of it as a souvenir. Later, it got discovered, and the call was made to a John Hurt in North Carolina, and I think research has indicated that he was Army counterintelligence of some sort. So it's just interesting that the only call he tried to make, while in custody, was to someone in the intelligence community.
Well, that was the only long distance call. He did talk to Ruth Paine.
Oh, that's right.
But of all the people that he could have called, and he ends up calling a guy, former military intelligence in North Carolina. And so now, as we know, the reason we know about this is that there were two telephone operators at the Dallas Police Headquarters. All right. And the Secret Service was there. They would write down the call. The Secret Service nixed that phone call. All right. And so one of the operators went ahead and threw it in the trash. Okay. Then the other operator was kind of curious about it, and she picked it up when her shift was over. All right. And she kept it. And so that's how we know about this call to John Hurt. And that's how we know it was an outgoing call. Now, the obvious question, how the heck did Oswald even know about this guy,
Exactly.
you know, in North Carolina, this military intelligence officer? How on earth did he know about this? And a lot of people think, and again, we don't know this for sure, but a lot of people think that it has something to do with the Nags Head Naval Base, which is in North Carolina. All right. And according to Victor Marchetti, the former CIA guy who passed away, that Nags Head base was an operative center for the Naval Defection Program.
Right.
All right. Okay. Now, if that's true, then that would make sense.
Sure.
You know, that is what the whole basis of the phone call was. Now, Marchetti was a CIA officer for a long period of time before he retired. And then he wrote a book, The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence,
Right.
which was heavily censored by the agency. All right. He said that, in his opinion, that Saturday night phone call
Got him killed.
was the last act that ended Oswald's life on Earth. Okay. All right. Because that was a very strong indication that he was getting ready to talk, and he wanted some instructions about what he should say.
Right.
All right. And so next morning, Jack Ruby comes in of Oswald. All right. So again, very, very interesting, you know, and very, very suggestive and evocative, I think.
And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah. And there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, you know, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you know, you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, you know, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. I mean, again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right? From Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
Absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go.
I'm
I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
Mark, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, that's perfectly sums it up. I mean, you can talk about, whether he was even supposed to live on November 22nd after the assassination. You can get into Tippit and all those things.
Right.
But then once he was in custody, there was a problem. He indicated that he was, wanting legal representation. I did nothing wrong. I'm a patsy, the whole thing. And so, the gears quickly shifted to, okay, we had an open and shut case here. We can use it as a Northwoods type operation to go against Castro, but that quickly got thrown in the trash can. And then, of course, this phone call was certainly the last nail. And like Jim said, the next morning he was eliminated. So it's be interesting to see if he had lived. In my opinion, he certainly wouldn't have been convicted of either murder. But that never. And then, of course, the Warren Commission took over and had a very controlled and limited investigation, and here we are still looking at it today.
A couple other names I want to throw out here. Fabian Escalante and what he said about his findings on Oswald. Do you want to go into that, Jim?
Well, Fabian Escalante was the head of G2,
Right.
which is the Cuban intelligence group. And so his responsibility was to guard Castro. And since Castro lived a natural life and death, I guess he did a pretty good job because the CIA tried to kill him quite a few times. All right. Yeah. And so one of the things Escalante did was he would have undercover agents infiltrated into the Cuban exile movement. All right. And Escalante was very interested in the Kennedy assassination. All right. And he was also very interested in David Phillips. Okay. Right. And he discovered these letters, all right, that someone had written to Oswald. Okay, I think I'm getting this right. That somebody had written to Oswald from Cuba, a series of 4 or 5 letters, if I recall correctly. All right. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, somebody on the island, knew about Oswald in the United States. It's very interesting right off the bat. And then Escalante put together a documentary on the Kennedy assassination. I don't remember the exact year that was released. Okay. But he came to the conclusion that a lot of people in the United States have come, that it was a loose coalition between the CIA, the Cuban exiles, and organized crime. That was his solution. I've never actually seen that documentary. As you can imagine, it's HBO's not going to show it. All right. Oh. But I heard it's actually not bad. Escalante is a very, very interesting character. He actually, I believe this was in 1999 or 2000. He attended a seminar in Rio de Janeiro, all right, in which were invited several Kennedy researchers. All right, I was one of the people invited, but I couldn't go. I couldn't get a passport as fast as needed. All right. But there is a book about that. All right. I think it's called ZR Rifle by a female reporter down there. Okay. And you can read some of the things that Escalante said. Now, of course, people of the opposite persuasion actually think that Escalante was involved in killing Kennedy, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of, especially considering the back channel that Kennedy had opened up to Castro in the last couple of months of his life. Right.
Right, exactly. And he was meeting with Danielle the day that he was assassinated.
Right.
Castro was. Mark, anything you want to add?
Yeah, there's a really good summary of Escalante's findings in the book Chokeholds. It's roughly on page 88. I mean, if you want me to read them, I can, but it's very, very clear the findings of purportedly what was, the Cuban intelligence group that looked into this, and Escalante was privy to that. It's very powerful, and I encourage everyone to read it, and that'll let what the foreign governments, even the government that may have been held responsible for the assassination falsely, that being Cuba, what they found, and I think it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, it's on pages 86 to 88.
Yeah.
Okay, in the opening. Now that opening chapter, by the way, what that's modeled to do is to show the dissidents in the main investigations. Okay, that is people who disagreed, all right, with what the official story ended up being. And if you can believe it, what we know today is that the Warren Commission was a minority report. What do I mean by that? Russell, John Sherman Cooper, okay, Hale Boggs,
right,
and secretly Gerald Ford,
right,
did not agree with the official conclusion. All right. So that shows you right off the bat, that there were people who didn't agree right within the official inquiry. And so that what Mark is referring to is we also covered other investigations, all right, that didn't agree with the official conclusion. And Escalante was one of them. All right. So
talk about another one, Jim. The church committee with Richard Schweiker and what he said about Oswald having the fingerprints of intelligence.
Richard Schweiker and Gary Hart were part of the church committee. The church committee was probably, without very much of a doubt, the most extensive examination of the crimes of the CIA and the FBI ever put together under an official banner. All right. And Church was friendly with Jack Kennedy. All right. And so he approved an inquiry by Senator Schweiker and Senator Hart that was on the performance of the intelligence community under the Warren Commission. Schweiker was probably the most outspoken member of Congress that, of my knowledge, since the JFK case. But some of the things that Schweiker said, and I think we managed to put at least one of them or two of them in the film, JFK Revisited and JFK Destiny Betrayed, were really, really out there. Okay, one of the things he said was that everywhere you look with Oswald, he has the fingerprints of intelligence around him.
Right.
Okay, which is true. He also said that due to their investigation, the Warren Commission had collapsed like a house of cards. The only question is, why did they kill Kennedy? Okay. Now, there's another one. I don't know if we put this in the book. When the church committee was expiring and the House Select Committee on Assassinations was coming into existence, Bob Tannenbaum was the chief counsel on the Kennedy side, under Richard Sprague. There was a King investigation and a Kennedy investigation, and Sprague appointed Tannenbaum on the Kennedy side. All right. So he went over to see Senator Schweiker with his chief of investigations, Cliff Fenton. All right. And they talked about what the church committee had done. And so then, after a few moments, Schweiker said, "There's something I want to talk about you in private." And so Cliff Fenton walked away, walked outside. And Schweiker picked up a folder out of his desk, gave it to Tannenbaum, and he said, "The CIA killed JFK." All right. So Tannenbaum's, here I am. Here's this senator, this totally Republican senator,
Right.
telling me that the CIA killed the president. And so we went back to my place, me and Cliff Fenton, and we went through this file that he had put together, and they didn't stop reading till dawn. All right. And Cliff tells Tannenbaum, "Bob, you know and I know we're in way over our heads on this one." Okay. And Tannenbaum says, "Well, I'm not going to walk away from the case, Cliff, so we better start swimming." And so these are what some of the people inside these investigations have had to say about the so-called official result.
And Jim, didn't Tannenbaum also see a film at I believe it was Lake Pontchartrain with David Farry, I believe Phillips and Oswald?
Right. He said that in an interview I did with him
Wow.
many years ago. Yeah, he said he saw this film, and he said there was Oswald, there was Farry, and there was David Phillips. And they brought in people who knew them to identify them. Okay. Which is really kind of amazing, when you think about it. And then that film has disappeared, of course. Okay. So it's a very, very interesting. And there's also another guy who saw the film. It was Colonel William Bishop. Okay. He said he saw it. And by the way, people try to discredit Bishop. In the National Security Memorandum of October 1963, there's a report of Bishop going to Dallas with Felipe Vidal Santiago. Okay, a very militant, hardcore, anti-Castro-Cuban exile, who some people think was actually involved in the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
All right. So anyway, yeah, that's correct.
And Jim, just a thing on Tannenbaum. He never lost the capital murder case in Manhattan. Right.
Yeah. He was 7 years. He was the chief of homicide in Manhattan. Okay. Wow. And according to him, he never lost a murder case. All right. Wow. In fact, according to him, he never lost a felony case. Okay. So if you take a look at this, Sprague had a record of 72-2. Okay, in homicide cases.
Right.
All right. Tannenbaum was even better. All right. Now, for the first time, the Kennedy case was going to be investigated by people who were very familiar,
right,
in how to solve a homicide case. All right. And not only were they very familiar, but they were very good at what they did, and had many, many years of experience. Okay. Sprague, you're from Pennsylvania, right?
Yep.
Okay. So am I. So then you probably know about the Jock Yablonsky case.
Right.
All right. That was a conspiracy by Tony Boyle to assassinate his political rival, Jock Yablonsky, in the UMW election. All right. Sprague was appointed special prosecutor in that case. All right. And he eventually, I think it was a series of 5 trials, working from the bottom up, he went and convicted Tony Boyle. for conspiracy to murder John Jablonski. All right. And so I think he's qualified. I think he's a heck of a lot more qualified than David Bellin, okay, to track down a murder case. But this is why we know today, of course, this is why they had to go.
Right.
All right.
They weren't going to use the FBI or the CIA.
No, they were not going to use the FBI or the CIA, but they wanted all the documents that they had. And they were not going to sign non-disclosure agreements.
Right.
DK's Corner, located on 802 East Lackawanna Avenue in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. Visit DK's Corner for hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, and delicious breakfast, including breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos. And take it from me, the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. Check out DK's Corner, Oliphant's little hoagie shop. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. That's DK's Corner in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. Do you need a new roof? Are you looking to repair damage to an existing roof? Call the roofing professionals at Quality Roofing Express. Located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Quality Roofing Express is a certified Owens Corning contractor. We are an independent, family-owned business connecting with our community and providing quality work. Our expert team can install metal roofs, rubber roofing, or traditional asphalt shingles. Do you need chimney flashing? How about a new skylight to increase your home's value and let that natural sunlight in? At Quality Roofing Express, we do it all, even siding. Check out our website, qualityroofingexpress.net, or visit us on Facebook. Give us a call at 570-614-3914 for a free estimate today. Quality Roofing Express. We put a roof over your head.
Mark, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, actually, thinking about the fingerprints of intelligence remarks made by Schweiker, I also want to point out to a little nugget in the book. We're talking about, what various insiders have to say. This is from William Kent, former chief of the JM Wave Miami Psychological Warfare Division before our friend George Ioannidis took over. And if we have time, Ioannidis is a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
But he was on record as using the famous useful idiot term for Oswald. And of course, he was quite familiar with the DRE in Miami and New Orleans. And, that kind of paints the picture of how they could probably get Oswald to do whatever they wanted, whether wittingly or unwittingly. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, didn't he got a little tipsy around Thanksgiving or something?
Yeah.
Okay, I think the story was from Dan No, it was from Fonzie, who told Dan Hardway. Okay, and Kent, who, as Mark said, was associated with the whole CIA operation there in Coral Gables, which was the biggest domestic CIA operation there was. And here he is saying Oswald was a useful idiot.
It doesn't get better than that.
Why don't you guys talk about what Ioannidis did at the House Select Committee with Robert Blakey and how he basically paralyzed that investigation?
Well, Jim, do you want me to take a stab
at it? Go ahead. You can start, and I'll fill it in.
All right. So again, I think this is one of the most fascinating stories in the whole story of the Kennedy case. And I think it paints the picture of the large level of cover-up engaged in by the CIA. So George Ioannidis was directly involved with the DRE in Miami and New Orleans, probably in joint or maybe as an assistant to David Phillips. He was undoubtedly aware of Oswald's fake FPCC chapter and the DRE's public interactions with him, and especially in August. So what I find fascinating And I know this is Jeff Morley's real, baby, because he spent the better part of 15 years fighting the CIA in court to get the Joanides files under a FOIA, Freedom of Information lawsuit. And I'm sure it was extremely frustrating, but he's written about it. So that's worth reading about in itself. But I found it fascinating that, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but as early as like 5 or 6 p.m. on November 22nd, Joanides was getting contacts from his DRE guys asking for the green light to release all of the stuff they had on Oswald, to get the legend growing as soon as possible, to be the first to get that out to the media. And I don't think he could contain them any longer. And that explains how the world knew of this whole guy's life story on that day, pretty much. So that was okay. That's one thing. So the HSCA is appointed following the church committee's work to reinvestigate the case. Joanides was supposedly retired. And, I think Tannenbaum, Lopez, and Hardway, maybe the combination of three of them, were on record as saying they were making pretty good progress with the CIA in getting files and doing their work, until Joanides came into the picture. And, they were told, okay, this guy's operational knowledge not operational knowledge, just, can help facilitate getting files from the CIA and be your liaison, so to speak. The CIA did not tell them about Joanides' activities and roles in 1963 and his undoubted knowledge of Oswald and his connections to the DRE operations. And if they had known that, I think Blakey and everyone's on record saying if we had known that, this would have been a different investigation. Joanides would have been a witness and possibly prosecuted, and not just a liaison to us. So that's really an interesting story. And in my opinion, and I think Jeff Morley's written about this, is that because he cannot get that file to this day, or at least the entire thing, that has to be part of the remaining withheld classified files. It's just that explosive. It ties everything back to the DRE, and then the connections with Oswald, and then the attempts to cover it up, like aggressive attempts, deceitful attempts.
Right. And the deal that Blakey made with the CIA is that the liaison was supposed to have no knowledge of what was going on with the activities there.
Yeah. They obviously lied about that.
Of course, they completely lied by putting Joanides there. Jim, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'll only say this from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Hardway said, Jim, up until the time Joanides was there, we were getting unredacted files with a pretty good rapid turnaround rate. Okay. It's when Joanides came in that everything changed.
Right.
Okay. To give you an example, instead of actually going to Langley, which is what Danny and Eddie were doing, all right, now, instead of them going there, now there was a room at the House Select Committee offices with a safe, all right, and the files now had to be transferred from Langley to that building, placed in that safe, and then inventorized. And then Danny and Eddie had to sign for them, all right? And whatever notes they made, that had to be included with what they gave back, all right? So in other words, they couldn't take their notes home with them and study them, all right? Everything went into that safe, all right? And so this very much slowed down everything. And now they were getting, redacted files, all right? So Joanides is a very large, and by the way, another thing about this, when Fletcher Prouty went down to the House Select Committee to do a pre-interview, he, of course, was one of the very few people who knew who Joanitas was.
Right.
All right. And so he told Leno Sanik, he goes, when I saw Joanitas there, this is good. This is not going to be a real investigation. So I just walked through my pre-interview and I didn't call them back afterwards. Okay. Once I saw that he was there as supposedly part of the inquiry. Now Blakey, of course, was suckered because they had an agreement that nobody involved in the Kennedy case from 1963, okay, would be appointed liaison.
Right.
So when Jeff Morley calls him up and tells him this, and he was really shocked. Okay. He was really shocked, and so that's when he made this little speech at the ARC conference in 2014 about how he had been lied to by the CIA. All right. And the CIA does not deserve a free pass anymore. Unfortunately, It took him a long time to come to that conclusion.
Absolutely. Well, there's two more things I want to get to because I know we've been on here a long time. I appreciate you guys staying on. But one story that I think is important that we tell, and Oliver, of course, put this in the movie in '91 at the beginning, but the Rosh Harami story. Jim, could you just give a quick story on that and what happened there? Because I think that's really important story in this whole thing.
Rosh Harami was a heroin addict, okay, and a high-priced call girl, all right, who was found on the side of a road going from, I think, Shreveport to Texas, all right, and she was picked up by a driver and taken to a hospital in a northern, I believe in Jackson, Louisiana. And a state trooper by the name of Francis Fruget took her from the private hospital to the state hospital. And she started talking about the Kennedy assassination, which hadn't taken place yet. Okay. All right. And very suggestive words about something is going to happen in Dallas to President Kennedy. And Fruget just, these are just the mumblings of somebody in withdrawal. They don't mean anything. And drops her off at the hospital. About 48 hours later, he jumps out of his chair when he hears that Kennedy's been assassinated.
Right.
Okay. He calls the hospital and says, "Don't let that girl go. I want to talk to her." All right. And so he goes up there again. She confirms that she knew about it with these two guys that she was driving with. And he calls up the Dallas police, and he then calls up the state police in Texas, and he wants to know, do you want to hear from this girl? I think she has some very interesting information. And if you can believe it, they both said no. They both said no. Okay. And then he asked her, "Well, do you want me to drive you to the FBI office?" Well, a person involved in the drug trade, okay, is not going to want to go to the FBI. And so that was it until Jim Garrison came along.
Right.
And then when Jim Garrison came along, he tracked down Fruget. All right. And this is really interesting. Fruget didn't know very much about the Kennedy assassination. Garrison obviously did. So he sends him out. "I want you to track down the highway she was on and the bar she was at before she got thrown out of the car. Okay? See if you can find anybody who saw her. Show them these pictures." And he put about 30 pictures into a briefcase, all right, and said, "See if you can." So he finds the place. The bartender was still working there, a guy named Mac Manuel.
Right.
All right. Here's a really stunning part of the story. When Manuel saw the pictures, now remember, Frugier cannot influence him because he doesn't know who these guys are.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. And so he reports back to Garrison. He picked out pictures of Sergio Arcacha Smith
Right.
and Emilio Santana.
Right.
Now, if that's not very important, I don't know what the heck is, because anybody who knows anything about New Orleans knows that Sergio Arcacha Smith was a very, very important character
And
in
he
the
was a
Cuban
Catholic.
Cuban exile movement who defected from Cuba when Castro took over, brought in by the CIA on a jet plane, okay, with his whole family and all of his belongings, and then set up offices in New Orleans, and he knew all these people. Okay,
Right.
the other guy, Emilio Santana, was a lower level guy, but he was a CIA contract employee.
Right.
Okay, so I don't see how more important you can get than this. It's very, very crucial. But
Right.
if you can believe it, it's not in the Warren Commission.
I believe it. Mark, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, yeah, the only other thing was, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, she was on record as saying that she had worked for Jack Ruby.
Yes, that's true. That's one of the things that she told Francis Frugier.
Yeah.
Didn't Frugier confirm that, Jim? Didn't he confirm that she did work for Ruby?
Well, that part has not been confirmed.
Okay.
Mainly because nobody, nobody, including Garrison, tried to track that part down. But according to Frugier,
Right.
she said that, and because he had the newspaper there about Oswald and everything, and she said they did know each other. All right, so, well, the code of the story, of course, is that she was found dead a few years later, all right, on a country road before Garrison could call her in, and have her under oath.
Right. Right. So let's this has been really great. Let's wrap it up. The last thing I want to talk about is just a couple examples, Mark, because before we got in the air, you talked about, you wanted to mention about the 60 years of obstruction of justice, and just give a couple examples, and then Jim, if you want to add to it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the last chapter of our book before the conclusion is a really good timeline and summary of more examples of obstruction of justice than you could find in any case in the history of the world. But I kind of made some quick notes here on what I find. You can go and read chapter 10. It's well worth it, just to get a feel for what we dealt with or saw the very afternoon of the assassination all the way up until today. So here's some quick ones. You have Katzenbach and Hoover immediately selling low nut explanation to the public 2 days after. You have questionable choices for the Warren Commission, including Dulles McCloy, and Gerald Ford. You have an amateur military-controlled autopsy. You could have a whole 3 shows on that. Doug Horn and Gary Aguilar and those guys would be great to talk on it. Autopsy photos and x-rays altered or disappeared. Autopsy notes burned. Connolly's bloody clothes immediately cleaned. The limousine is shipped away and repaired and cleaned up. Oswald's note to Hosty, delivered within a couple of weeks of the assassination, made some sort of threat. It's funny, Jim, we recently saw an affidavit from the secretary in that FBI office that I think stated under oath that it did say something about blowing up the FBI if you don't leave my wife alone. Hosty, interestingly, remembered it as something less sinister, like I'll take appropriate action if you don't talk to me directly and not through my wife. Mm-hmm. Of course, the CIA's obstruction of the Garrison case, Jim knows all about that, and it's just shocking. And basically they knew that if he got the conviction of Clay Shaw, that the whole thing would unravel. So they did everything they could to stop that. The Sprague and Tannenbaum thing, I mean, they were absolutely ousted from their initial roles in the HSCA. And as Jim has said, if there was two guys who were going to solve this like a real murder case, if they didn't have interference, they didn't have to deal with Joe and Edie's. Actually, I think it might have been Blakey that had to. There's a sort of there's a gap there. But the point is they still had the witnesses. It was only 15 years after the case. They knew how to run a murder case, and they were kicked out when it was obvious that was their intent. The AR, Jim's talked about the ARB and the intelligence agency resistance. And of course, we touched about this at the beginning, Trump, Biden, and the Gannon memo. Agencies are now being allowed to do what they want when they're comfortable. And the president is withholding congressional records without authority and is not being required to follow the JFK Records Act. And here we are.
So I ask you, if this was a simple open and shut case and Oswald did it, why this whole trail of folly that extends up until today? As Mark just mentioned, you had the whole Napolitano disclosure. You had the whole thing about Pompeo's lawyer calling up Tucker Carlson. I mean, this is not ancient history. I mean, this is going on right up until today.
Right. Absolutely. Well, anything you guys want to say to wrap this up? Anything we left out that you want to talk about? Bill, you got anything to add there?
No, nothing. This has been fantastic. Yeah. No, Mark, Jim, we thank you guys for coming on, and the book Chokeholds, again, we've mentioned it. You can find it anywhere books are sold. We have it on our bookshop, right, Sean? This is great.
Don't forget kennedysandking.com.
kennedysandking.com. That's Jim's website. Mark, anything you want to plug or talk about before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think your show is great. I've listened to a bunch of episodes, both on the JFK stuff and outside of it. So keep up the good work. We just hope that more people continue to read Chokeholds, and we think it's a really easy read for folks that want to get, kind of all the information that's, again, not really no speculation in the book. Our goal was to make it based on the official record and make it easy for someone who hasn't really studied the case to see that there's a problem here, and then others that have studied the case, you're not focusing on one. There's so many wonderful books written on, one little thing like the autopsy or Secret Service, and all that stuff is awesome, but this is a bit different, and we're very happy with it.
All right, sounds good. All right, Jim, Mark, thank you guys very much, and that's enough out of you. That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.